Building a shelter from scratch depends on the environment you're in. So if you're in the woodlands, it's knowing that sort of terrain, knowing the materials that you can use and the way to actually construct the shelter. But of course, if you was in the North or South Pole, you better know how to build an igloo or dig in a snow shelter. Whereas here, as soon as I entered the woods, and if I was considering having to construct a shelter for sort of protection, I was predicting that I was actually going to stay in the place, or it was a survival emergency situation, then you need to sort of read your terrain. So as soon as I came in, I thought the first thing I want to do is conserve my energy and time and save as much of that as possible. So of course part of my shelter was already constructed. Of course the upright of the tree was broken from not far from the base of the trunk, but of course it just happened to be the right height as soon as I saw it for me to be able to sort of comfortably get under there and have a little bit of headroom. And then as it slants down, that's where my feet end are going to be. Obviously because it's slanting down, I'm using shorter pieces of wood, if you saw me actually construct it earlier on, and then gradually going up to longer pieces. But if I had more energy and time and I was going to build a longer term shelter, then I could actually look at my terrain and say, just here, well, I've got two near enough vertical uprights, one there and one here. The width between that horizontal line is long enough for me to lie down in. So if you've got more time and the circumstances dictate that you can actually do something along the nature of this. The beauty of this one enables you to have a little bit more of a steeper incline, which then creates less water ingress in comparison, which as you can see is a different angle. This is about 45 degrees. It's about halfway between the horizontal and the vertical, and you wouldn't want to be going any lower than that. So the lower the angle, the more the water will settle from any rain or any inclement weather, and it will actually stay there and maybe ingress, where at least with this is just at the right angle. And if I did get any spots of water inside from it, I just come outside and then just re-plug it with more leaves and any more foliage, literally to seal the hole. But I mean, this is going to get me out of an emergency situation where I need to get out of the inclement weather if that's the case. Of course, with a structure like this one, the closer I bring them to get a higher angle, so the water definitely doesn't get any ingress through the back part of the shelter. So that's where, if at all possible, you just make sure when you do insert those, there is enough footprint for you to comfortably lie down and be out of the elements, rain, water, snow, whatever. But of course with this you can see there's a protrusion, which actually, if you take a vertical line down, has extended my footprint. Hence I've got more floor space. Extra piece of lightweight trusses to then support whatever foliage you've got. But in a perfect world, if you can get hold of this stuff, pine tree boughs, conifer, anything along that line of type of tree, then it actually serves a much better practicality to actually weave and create that coverage of where it protrudes over the top of the beam. It's also worth considering any type of foliage debris shelter you build, every now and then cordaging the same way we've done here and here, but with the lean-to struts, just maybe making a cordage fastening to keep it secure, especially if we're talking about using larger, heavier pieces of wood. So it reduces the slide factor. But if you get your sort of gravitational positions and you get the centre of gravity, it's always going to support itself. It's a little bit like when you're building an arch, the stability and support of that structure is actually established when the keystone, it's called the keystone, goes in the middle, and then everything falls on itself. So the weight and the strength is created from the eventual keystone, creating the structure and support of the arch. Of course this isn't an arch, but it's the same principle. So we've always got that stability, everything's centre of gravity, so it bears where it should do its weight. So of course there's less chance of it moving around, but as you can notice just here, I've got some sort of vines that I could use, double it up, maybe plait it, and then that's going to be strong enough to make particular fastenings as well if I need to. Again, it's surveying your terrain and knowing what you can use as soon as you go into that particular environment. So it all comes down to, at the end of the day, aspects of structures and connections that you can do to actually make the shelter. So what I've given is just really some really basic fundamental principles, but of course there's much more involved in building shelters, which is good to sort of find out about, research, so that whenever you're in different terrain, you know as best as possible what to do. In a woodland, obviously you've got many more materials to actually work with once you've got ideas of how to use them. So where I've collected a lot of the debris leaves, as you saw, I compacted on top of the main understructure. Then of course the leaves were gently compacted, and then just putting other bits of wood, bits of timber, just sort of placed so it keeps it compacted. So it's as if the leaves are sort of within a cavity of 2 layers of wood. The inner surface and then just a few pieces that were placed on the outside here. Normally in woodlands, when you're actually in the heart of the woods, there's not really much breeze. If the wind, it's normally on the crown of the trees. So it's not as if I'd get any gusts of wind that would actually blow that away. But if there was, that's exactly why I just placed pieces of wood just to sort of sandwich it. And if I hadn't had my poncho or anything similar to collect the leaves and save time so I could get them all together, then I would have made up something similar to this. With what was here and some of my cord, and swept a big collection of the leaves together and then had to sort of hand carry them to my pitch. As you can see, it's long enough to lay down in. If I want to close this end off here, my head end, I can do with other bits of foliage and bits of stubs of wood. But if I wanted to, at a later date, make this bigger so it was an entrance from this end, I could do the same this side as what I've done this side, which will give me more protection. But at the moment, it's sort of a bit more open plan, if you want to call it that, because I can have my fire set up here, maybe a reflector with pieces of wood built up to reflect the heat in, so it's really nice and cosy and protective away from the elements. So once you've got settled and the main shelter established, you can then go about considering, I've used the poncho to protect from the ground if there's any dampness, but also underneath that I could get some more debris leaves and even actually construct a wooden strutted bed, and then putting struts of wood and then just padding it out with leaves, and then I could put the poncho back on, or if I did need to actually wear the poncho, it would sort of be laying on a structure similar to this, but on ground level. So it's a softer surface to sit and lay on, and also it's a thermal insulation away from the ground. If I was going to have to pitch up for a shorter period of time and the weather wasn't too bad where I didn't need actually waterproofs and I wasn't going to move around, then of course I could use the old faithful poncho tarp as a shelter and protection, either fixed to trees or creating this sort of structure where I might actually have it on 2 uprights and just as a lean-to. So the poncho tarp could actually replicate the shelter that I've built, but obviously in a smaller, lighter version. I could actually utilise it with this shelter as well, as it stands with a diagonal lean-to, and then I could actually put some cordage in the rings and then fix it. Could actually have it so the tarp poncho was coming down at this angle, so the entrance would be in this way. Again, it's purely down to circumstance and practicality whether that would be a purpose, but at least you have the alternative and choice to actually think of that, using the cord to make the fixings of the poncho tarp to close in this side at an angle. So even here I could have used the same sort of principle, the same sort of shelter, but always testing, because safety is prime important. With the main aspect of surveying your terrain, the safety factor, especially if you're in the woods, is actually looking at where the deadfall is, which is the majority of the wood that I've actually used, and I haven't had to cut it. I use my saw just for convenience and speed for about 10% of actually making the shelter that I did. If there is a lot of fallen wood, fallen trees, then you look out for anything else that could be potentially dangerous. The old widow makers, as they're called, where there could be more branches that might fall, but again you just have to check as best you can and assess where you are for that safety. Of course, the subject of survival has many things to consider. Not just one's confidence in their knowledge and skills, but it's an ongoing process even for the most experienced. Plus as well there's the psychology, the survival mindset of never giving up. Plus as well there's considering eventualities that could unexpectedly happen when one's out on their adventures. For a little bit of sustenance, I've got a brew in my hot flask. I've also got a snack bar amongst other little sundries in the front part of the pouch, but normally this pouch I'll use for my hobo stove. Versatile as possible, but prior to that, this is my hobo stove that I made myself, and I'll break it down and explain it to you in a moment. Okay, homemade hobo stove, made out of 2 stainless steel containers. But today I've used this pouch for the flask, and also below that was a small pair of pack light waterproof trousers. But if we just finish off with just one final aspect about survival, it's not all doom and gloom. The majority of survival scenarios normally get concluded within about 3 to 4 days. Once the alarm has gone out by the people that need assistance, or back at base people haven't returned and the alarm's gone out from search and rescue, it's normally concluded within about 3 to 4 days. So it's just biding the time during those days to get by the best way you can, and a lot of that is to do with just some really basic fundamental skills and of course having the right mindset. But I'm going to have my brew now, and then I'm going to make my way back to my home and start planning for my next little adventure, and I'll most probably catch you in that little adventure. So thanks for watching this, thanks for following me around, and I'll catch you again soon. Cheers.